See you all here again, or for the first time. My name is Jacob Horton. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the Nantucket Historical Association, and welcome to this afternoon's Food for Thought presentation. I want to thank a couple of supporters. One, MS Worthington Foundation supports this lecture series each fall and spring here in the Whaling Museum. Also, as always, all of our audiovisual tools are supported generously by Novation Media, and so we'd like to thank them as always. Couple notes, please keep your phones silenced for the duration of the presentation, and restrooms, should you need them, right around the corner that way. All right, let's get to today's presenters, Sara Boyce and Chip Webster. Sara Boyce has over 20 years of marketing and coaching experience at both an organizational level and an individual level. She washed ashore in 2001. She founded the Brigham Galleries before going on to launch her boutique marketing company. Her blog is called A Delicious Lifestyle. It reflects her passion for health and wellness, particularly here in the Nantucket community. Chip Webster is a 17th generation Nantucketer, and he's been actively involved in the architecture, building, and design field for 30 years. In 91, he established the Nantucket-based firm Chip Webster Architecture, and he has a personal passion for, as we may learn about today, the structure of communities and what makes them work. So without any further hesitation, help me welcome Sara and Chip.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Nantucket Historical Association for having us here today, and thank you all for coming out. Sara and I are here today to speak about the comparison of two communities on the surface that seem very different, but upon closer inspection have striking similarities. Our community here on Nantucket and Black Rock City, home to the annual gathering known as Burning Man. After the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A. So Burning Man occurs every year the last week of August in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. The property is Bureau of Land Management, organized or controlled property. Last year, the event included participants from all 50 states and 40 countries around the world. I've been personally attending for about 10 or 15 years, and it's quite the unique event. Approximately 70,000 people come together and build an entire city in the middle of the desert, live in it for the entire week, and then leave no trace that it was ever there. It's about 2 hours north of Reno, and the conditions can be very inhospitable, and it can be 110 degrees during the day with blinding dust storms and go down to almost freezing temperatures at night. So you really have to be prepared for a lot of conditions. So you might ask yourself, then why go? Well, today we'll show you. So as its comparison between this is Nantucket. You probably all recognize this. Nantucket is, as you may or may not know, is approximately 48 square miles. It has about 45% of open space, and it is surrounded by a border, which is obviously the water, as it's an island. Black Rock City, sorry, let me get my little pointers figured out, is about 5 square miles. So it's about 1/10 the size of Nantucket, although it has 69% open space. And it similarly also has a border around it. It's surrounded by a fence and open playa that gives it an isolated sort of feel to it. Gosh, okay, I'm really going to get these pointers figured out soon. There we go. So in 1641, the Earl of Stirling deeded the island of Nantucket to Thomas Mayhew, and 18 years later, he sold the island to a group of investors led by Tristram Coffin for 30 pounds and 2 beaver hats. Now this is important to know that the logo has the 2 beaver hats and the 30 pounds in it for the Nantucket Historical Association, in case people didn't know that. Burning Man, on the other hand, was started in 1986 by Larry Harvey when a dozen of his friends went to San Francisco's Baker Beach for a summer solstice ritual. This was from the first Burning Man. This was the beach where his dozen or so friends set up. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. And in 1990, they moved to the Black Rock Desert, the property that I spoke about. This is from one of the very early Burning Mans. You can see it's not a huge group of people. There's the man standing there in the middle of the desert. And from 1990 until the present, this is where it has remained. Nantucket is a community that's developed over about 300 years. The open space, the infrastructure, the development, the road system, everything has evolved as the needs of the population have changed. Whereas Black Rock City is a very specific, organized structure that is laid out, built each year, and each year it's fine-tuned. So you can see here, the man basically is in the middle of the whole thing. The temple, which we'll talk about later, is there. And the streets are organized in a radial fashion, a concentric fashion, with the concentric streets alphabetized and the radial ones being the times of the clock. So you can find your way around by knowing the address based on what time and the alphabet. Nantucket's densest development is focused on the water, as that's its main appeal. So you see most of that happening along the waterfront, whereas at Black Rock City, it faces the playa. So the densest areas, you can't really tell in this photo, but the densest areas are right around the edges of this where it interfaces, particularly in this area. The man is in the middle, where the majority of the activity happens. This is an interesting thing. So both the island of Nantucket and Burning Man have about 70,000 people at their peak time. And as I pointed out earlier, at Burning Man, those 70,000 people are in an area about 1/10 the size of Nantucket and have actually more open space. So that's an interesting thing. Both communities take about 2 hours to get to from their closest major city or landmass in our part, and both will have potential delays. Burning Man is accessed by a 2-lane road from Reno, so with 70,000 people trying to get there at the same time, it might take 8 or 10 hours instead of the usual 2 hours. I think this last year, it took as long as 17 or 18 hours for some people to get there. And of course, Nantucket is accessed by boat, and inclement weather and unforeseen conditions can sometimes delay the time it takes to get to the island. But you can also get to Burning Man by boat. If you so choose. And as you may know, many people in Nantucket may choose to fly there, sometimes on private planes to get to Nantucket. Well, you can do the same thing at Burning Man. Burning Man has a private airport that is constructed for the duration of the event that is capable of taking all sizes of planes. And it looks a lot like the airport here in the summer where you'll see a whole lot of private planes lined up. Both are serviced by energy from outside sources. Nantucket has a 35 megawatt cable that connects us to the mainland. Burning Man operates on generators. And as you all know, here on Nantucket, we can have sudden bouts of fog that will make it such that transportation can cease. And as the saying goes on Nantucket, fog happens. At Burning Man, dust happens. Dust storms can come up randomly and go for several hours, sometimes for days at a time, causing the need for masks and goggles and all sorts of things. But the center focus of Burning Man is an effigy of a man that each year has depicted in a different fashion based on the theme of the year. This year, it was obviously a UFO. Just to give an idea of the size of this is hundreds of feet tall. If that entire slot inside the flying saucer is probably 20 feet tall, so a person standing there would be very small in that. And this whole thing is obviously also elevated up above the ground. So every year, the effigy of the man is different based on the theme, but every year, the man burns. So that is sort of the culmination of the event on Saturday evening, is the lighting and burning of this man, or the effigy of it. This is one from a previous year, and then, of course, what it looks like before and during the burn. Sarah?
So Chip and I had been talking for years about going, or I had been talking to Chip about going and joining him for years because he's been for 12 plus years. This was the first year I went, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be a massive party. maybe even a little bit insane. But what I found was that this was an arts and cultural experience and rivaled many of the top art fairs that I'd gone to when I had my gallery. And you remember Chip's map of the 69% open space, and it's dotted with monumental sculptures throughout. And just one is more fabulous than the other. So as we rode our bikes around, because that's the way you get around, we started wondering, how do these sculptures appear? And it turns out there's a very serious application and selection process, and the Burning Man Foundation receives models, artist intent submissions, and they give out $1 million in grants every year. So this was the final up close. But not all of the art is funded. Here's this random little guy about our height that was also in the desert. Some of the sculptures are interactive. So at the base of the man that Chip just showed us, we could walk in and there's all these different rooms. And this was an example of one sculpture that was in one room, and you stand across and put your hand on a drum that corresponds to each of the faces, and they light up and start talking. I mean, it was just such an incredible experience. It felt like, at times, the art might just eat you up. But the interesting thing that I didn't expect was at night, everything is so dark. So all of the sculpture you can see at the bottom there, everything of any size is lit. And it's not just sculptures. Just like on Nantucket, there's such a commitment to performances of all types. And on Nantucket, many of the artists are visiting artists in addition to the resident artists, but obviously at Burning Man, they're all visiting artists. And look at these. They're just fabulous performances everywhere you go. On Nantucket, we know that most of the art is two-dimensional. There's 51 art galleries, but there's tons of different performances as well here, which we get to enjoy all summer long and all year long. And here's an example. David Hostetler does corporate monumental art as well. But the thing that I thought was most interesting were the art cars. So not only are there sculptures dotted throughout the desert, but there are these roving art cars. And so art car doesn't even define what it is. It's hard to imagine what they are, but the Division of Mutant Vehicles is the organization that you have to submit to. And it's the same kind of thing. It's a submission process. And the only requirements are that each car is heavily mutated and for the community. So as you're going through, you can see that they can either be one or two person or handle large amounts of people. This is the Christina, which is a boat, one of your favorites, boat that was excavated from the bottom of Lake Tahoe, and some crazy people decided to turn it into an art car for Burning Man and have DJs and massive dance parties that drive through the desert. And so because they have to be for the community, many of the cars will stop and start periodically, and you can see the bikes in the front. You get on the car, drive around for a while, get off, and go off and do your next experience. The interesting thing is that all of the cars, that there's a legal speed limit of 5 miles an hour to prevent dust, for safety, and to prevent big ruts in the desert, because these are massive vehicles, and they don't want to damage the desert. But then, there's small little things as well. And again, I had no idea what to expect with the nighttime display, because all of a sudden at night, everything is lit up and it is pitch black. So not only do you have to be lit with Christmas tree lights or neon glow so that nobody runs into you, but all of the cars are lit, and you can see around the edge 360 degrees of where you look. The camps have neon edging, and there's lights, and people like to burn things up there. So there's lots of fire. And there's also a lot of architectural structures. And on Nantucket, we also have the same commitment. A lot less neon and flames. And our focus is much more on preservation and history. You know, the NHA does a fabulous job of maintaining 22 of these fabulous properties. And you can see, here's a picture of the modern day bank and what it looked like years and years ago. So there's such a commitment to impeccable preservation here. Obviously, everything at Burning Man is temporary, whether it's brought in or burned. I mean, this is many stories high. There's a man named Andy on island, I don't recollect his last name, who actually went out there to help build this one. And at the end, it's burned. Here's an example of a Wall Street installation, and those are building-size sculptures. And what do you think happens? It burns. So all different types of craftsmanship and work goes into these architectural sculptures. And again, you can walk through them all. It's very similar because there's such a level of craftsmanship and artistry on Nantucket as well. Again, interactive. But as you remember, the temple was one of the focal points at noon. The man is in the middle. Every year, the temple changes. The architectural design is different. And it's really a very sacred place. It's quiet. You go in, people are encouraged to post photographs, flowers, notes you can write on the walls, and at the end, it burns. And the idea is that figuratively and literally, you are burning something and releasing. And I didn't know what to expect. This was the final night. You know, everything was new for me. The night before, we had been, and the man burned. And that was extraordinary. It was like, well, it's been said that it was the largest party on planet Earth. There's 70,000 people all around the circumference. All the art cars have gathered around. Every car has different DJs and music. And it was this jubilant party. But the next night, the temple burned, and people walked away in silence. But it doesn't just happen. There's this extraordinary infrastructure that is built, and it's built with so many volunteer hours and people committed to creating the community.
So over the 25 years of the life of thus far, the lifetime of Burning Man, there have been many changes. It started as a sort of impromptu gathering of people having a party in the desert, but what it's really turned into is this very focused and organized arts and music event. And as a result of that, there are 10 guiding principles that the Burning Man organization has established that are the principles by which the community is expected to respond and be, and also the individuals. And one of those 10 principles is radical inclusion. So I'm going to read a little bit from what Burning Man defines as radical inclusion. It means anyone may be a part of Burning Man. We welcome and respect the stranger. No prerequisites exist for participation in our community, which we feel is also very similar on Nantucket, where we have all types of people of all social economic strata and interests and activities. At Burning Man, people of all ages are invited to participate, and there are people of all ages, as are in Nantucket. There are children in Nantucket. In fact, there's an entire area of Burning Man that is dedicated for families and children. There's a family enjoying themselves at Burning Man, much like a family enjoying themselves on Nantucket. And as part of the radical inclusion, one of the things that's, again, I think is similar between Burning Man and Nantucket is you don't really know who the person next to you might be. It could be a landscaper, it could be the CEO of a company, or it could be both. At Burning Man, people are frequently in goggles and masks and so forth, so their identity is, is part where so there's the full sort of range. There's this anonymity, is the word, I guess, that exists in both. So that's radical inclusion. A second of the 10 principles is civic responsibility. As Burning Man says, community members who organize events should assume responsibility for public welfare and endeavor to communicate civic responsibilities to participants. The Burning Man organization puts in a basic framework of structure. Beyond that, everyone is expected to take care of themselves. The basic structure is the road layout, portalets, some medical services, and so forth. So that there's a lot of I should say, there's a base of background infrastructure and so forth that Burning Man puts in, but then the majority of it is by the volunteerism of the individuals and groups that come together to build the camps, to operate the camps, and to make the decisions and so forth. Again, here at Nantucket, as you know, we are still operated by town meeting, so that on Nantucket, everyone as an individual can have a voice and have a say in that. Oh, I was going to say, okay, let me go back to this one for a second. Just some financial data is kind of interesting. So I'm referring to the sort of general budget for Burning Man of about 2 years ago. It increases each year, but generally speaking, it's about the same. So the funds for the Burning Man event are raised through the sale of tickets. Approximately $9 million was raised through ticket sales. And interesting enough, about half of that, actually a little bit more than half of that, goes to the U.S. government, specifically to the Bureau of Land Management for licensing and permit fees. Of the remaining amount, as Sara pointed out, about $1 million goes to artist grants, $1 million goes to the portalets, and then the remaining amount goes to other infrastructure costs, ticket sales, construction of some of the common facilities, and so forth. So just thought that was kind of interesting. We started to do a analysis of exactly how that fits into the Nantucket budget. On the first pass, if you do it on a per diem thing, they're strikingly similar, but we don't have enough to really comment to that in today's presentation. A third principle of the 10 principles of Burning Man is participation. As Burning Man says, we achieve being through doing. Everyone is invited to work. Everyone is invited to play. We make the word world real through actions that open the heart. So we have some images here in Nantucket, as well as some from Burning Man, showing that participation. This group of people are the torchbearers that bring the lights to burn the man. And
then the next one is communal effort. And I know I've said this, but I didn't know what to expect. So I knew there was dust. I knew there was a desert. I knew there was partying. I knew there was camping. So kind of thought we'd party in the desert while we're camping. But I didn't really imagine how many people and bikes and sculptures and events there would be. And it all comes together with this communal effort. So this is, in the center is the man, and then there's the temple. So it starts and slowly fills in. This is a woman named Bunny that we picked up on the way out, and we took her back to Reno to the airport. She had come 23 days prior with a whole temple building crew, and they worked like crazy to create the temple. But it wasn't just that 3 weeks, it's the entire year that a whole team is planning to make this happen. And every structure throughout the desert comes together with this communal effort. Was that one you wanted to see? So here was this nice little zendo that was built in the middle of the desert for rest and some shelter from the shade. Obviously it got built. This is what it looked like empty. And then it gets filled in and utilized. We know on Nantucket there's over 100 charities. There's so many events and organizations, and they all share the same commitment to communal effort. You might recognize some of these antique show ladies. The next principle is gifting, and Burning Man is a gifting culture, and it's not barter, and it's not trade. It's gifting with no intent of receipt in reciprocity. There are 2 things for sale on the playa, and coffee and ice are the 2 things. I was very glad to find out there was coffee. And not so it's also been estimated that the value of everything that is gifted over the course of the week totals in excess of $20 million. Not everything is a commodity that you are given. And you might recognize a similarity to. But again, Nantucket gives. It's a gifting community. There's 112 charities. Not all of the charities have reported their contributions and grants, but Jeremy Slavitz has done some research and found out of those that did report, there's over 24 million that is collected in contributions and grants. The next principle is decommodification, and that serves to back up the former principle, gifting. And they define it as, in order to preserve the spirit of gifting, our community seeks to create social environments that are unmediated by commercial sponsorships, transactions, or advertising. So there's no corporate sponsorships. You're recommended to cover up any logos with a sense of humor, if you will. And we saw a similarity to Nantucket's commitment to keeping chain stores away. I mean, obviously, we're a retail culture. The artists need to make a living. Everybody's here to run not everybody's here, but people are here to survive, and so the small businesses thrive. But at Burning Man, you don't even see artist names, so they take the decommodification that far that there's not, people aren't trying to promote themselves to sell.
So there are 2 more of the guiding principles of Burning Man. And I believe that the first building block of community is within the individual. I always say, before you put the mask on the person next to you, put the mask on yourself. One of the principles that resonates the most with me is called radical self-reliance. Burning Man encourages the individual to discover, exercise, and rely on his or her inner resources. So what does that mean? What that means is that you have to bring with you everything that you need to survive in the desert. You need to bring with you everything you need individually, and everything that your group that you're coming with in camp needs. And that includes your water, your food, your clothing, whatever you need, and you have to take everything with you when you leave. There's no place to leave trash. You have to be very conscious of what you're bringing, and you also have to take it with you. Here's an example of a typical vehicle going into Burning Man. You can see it's laden with tents and tarps and coolers and chairs and everything like that, almost as if they're planning for a week on Nantucket. As I mentioned, there's as radical self-reliance means taking care of yourself, but it also means the group that you're with. Bringing everything that you might need for your entire group, but of course not forgetting the things that you might need for yourself as an individual. And again, on Nantucket, as we all know, there's a long history of radical self-reliance that exists within our community and has for several hundred years. And then the 10th of the guiding principles, maybe my personal favorite, radical self-expression. Radical self-expression arises from the unique gifts of the individual. No one other than the individual or collaborating group can determine its content. It is offered as a gift to others. Radical self-expression may occur in the form of performance or costume. Again, Burning Man and Nantucket, a little radical self-expression. Acting. In Nantucket, Burning Man, or in fashion. This is one of my favorite ones here. and an umbrella always adds a nice touch to radical self-expression. So, oh, wait a second. Those weren't the final 10. There's more.
There's more. So the next one is leave no trace. And that was actually the first principle that was established. And as we know, it's bringing everything to the desert that you need and taking it away. And they take it so seriously. It's don't even bring glitter because you don't want to leave glitter on the desert sand. Don't pour your water out because it might not rain for months and you don't want to mar the desert. So there's recycling camp. We also share the same commitment. And in fact, Nantucket's one of the leaders in the nation recycling, and only 6% of our garbage goes into landfill. And for point of reference, 66% in Massachusetts, trash goes into a landfill. So not only are the individuals encouraged not to leave a trace, but there's a big group that stays well beyond to clean up after everybody after this festival leaves. And they take it really seriously. So moop is the word that they use for trash, and it means matter out of place. And you're even held accountable. So this is obviously the map, and they map out the moop, and they get back to the camps and the ticket holders for the next year. So people are paying attention. So this was a photograph this year, 1 month after the festival ended, where people are still patrolling the desert in a line to look for any little bits of trash, moop, down to cigarette butts, etc. Now, Nantucket also has a commitment to picking up its moop, and there is the clean team that meets every Saturday morning where people patrol the beaches. So that's another similarity. The final, not the final, another principle.
It's the
This
10th.
is the 10th we're talking
Yeah.
about, and it's the most recent, and it's immediacy. And let's see, how do they define immediacy? It was a little confusing when you read it, but immediate experience is, in many ways, the most important touchstone of value in our culture. We seek to overcome barriers that stand between us and a recognition of our inner selves, the reality of those around us, participation in society, and contact with a natural world exceeding human powers. No idea can substitute for this experience. So what does this mean? We intuitively know what it means, and we put away time and money to go on vacation, to go to Burning Man, to go to Nantucket, so that we can connect with people that we care about, connect with ourselves, spend time doing the things we love. And here's a sculptural installation detailing one of the most obvious blocks to immediacy in our day and age. And it looks a little ridiculous. And then how many times have we seen this when we go out to restaurants? So it's a reminder to take immediacy away and enjoy the activities that you're doing. Be present, whether you're enjoying the sunset on the desert or on island. Be present, connect. One of the things we thought was interesting as we were talking about this is the logo for Burning Man, and there's such a similarity between the two locations of all of these volunteer hours that are put together to create these ephemeral events. And so I was doodling, it's like small communities and groups come together, they put all these hours in, we create these events that are usually artistic here and there, and then they're for the greater community to enjoy. So, now I think we're going to wrap up.
Yes. How are we doing this time? Okay, so in summary, so these slides that we're looking at right here, these are alternating images between Nantucket and Burning Man, showing what we feel it shows some of the similarities between the two. You'll recognize a lot of these images, Tony Sarg, of course, and then how it might be represented at Burning Man. So in summary, we feel Burning Man is a wonderful, unique experience. It synthesizes art and community, as does Nantucket. Both Burning Man and Nantucket are microcosms of life in a much larger world. Both share commitment to art, commitment to giving, commitment to spending times with friends and family, beauty and nature, and of course, celebration. So, as I said, these are some images going back and forth between maybe a magic carpet here on the island and a magic carpet in the desert. A functional artistic car here on the island and its counterpart maybe in the desert. So while this is going, this will just be going in the background for a little bit. I would like to open it up for any questions that anyone might have from the audience.
By all means, raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll bring the mic to you. Please speak into the mic.
Well, I've always heard about Burning Man, but never had a sense of really what it was. So I've got to go. It looks absolutely great. I don't get a lot of it, but what were your accommodations? Where did you stay while you were there?
We camped.
Yeah. I'll speak in a broader context because it's a good question. There's a wide range of accommodations, and it's whatever you bring with you. I would say that numerically, probably the largest number of people come in tents, and followed by RVs. You might have seen one of the earlier images that showed just lots of RVs. It depends on how comfortable you want to be. If you really feel that you want to embrace the desert experience and so forth, you would come in a tent. If you want to be able to get out of the dust storm, I love this comparison, the large bike on Nantucket and then the large bike at Burning Man. So an RV is a very comfortable way of doing that if you want a place to get out of that. Some people will build very intense structures. Like a group might come together and build a geodesic dome that they use as their housing or their kitchen. A typical camp, for instance, would be each individual would have their own tent, but as a camp, they would have a larger common geodesic dome. We have a gathering place to get out of the sun and have kitchen facilities and so forth.
And the generator and
Right.
a pretty minimal shower structure.
Yeah.
Another question? Do you? Yes. Please, hold it like this.
Thank you. I had no idea it was such a spiritual experience. I think I always thought it was just like hippie dome, that kind of thing. I have a real fear of fire, and I'm wondering, you may have addressed this before I came in, but what about the fire department and putting fires out in water and stuff?
Do you want to? I can answer it with you.
Sure.
You mean the fire department at Burning Man? Yes. Okay. So there is all of the fires are permitted. They're organized. They have huge teams of fire people to put out the fires. So it's all very controlled. Some of the fires, particularly the largest ones of the Man and the Temple, are staggering in their size, hundreds of feet tall, and tornadoes of fire and dust will be spinning off of them. But there is an entire perimeter that everyone is set back, and there are fire trucks and everything in case that's needed. They also, a lot of these events that have fire draw on the volunteerism and participation of the greater group. We happened to be at a place where one of the larger structures was about to be burned, and we were invited to be part of the committee to keep people far enough away. So they handed out vests. We put on vests, and we made a giant circle of people in the vests to keep people away. So it's although it has this look of abandon, there's a lot of safety and so forth in there.
Another question here?
Thank you both for that excellent presentation. Is this a police-free experience for the week?
Interesting. Yes, right? So yes and no. My understanding is that the Bureau of Land Management receives a fee from Burning Man and pretty much says, you got it now. So, right?
No. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean
So now I defer to the person with all the expertise in historical.
Virtually every law enforcement agency, from federal to state to local, it has a strong presence at Burning Man. Is that what you're asking? Police free, you said, right? Yeah, okay. So, and they are an integral part of the event and structure. that's why one of the guiding principles, civic responsibility, kind of refers to that. Everyone is expected to be as responsible as they would be anywhere else out in the world. So if you're out in public space, you don't do things that people would not expect to have happen in public space elsewhere. So there is a very integrated enforcement presence. However, it's much like, I don't know if people have an experience, New Orleans police are noted around the world for how good they are because they can handle things like Mardi Gras and so forth that are huge events and crowd control and not get overzealous in their reactions to things. So I would say it's similar at Burning Man. You know, the law enforcement there doesn't get overzealous and they're looking for infractions or whatever.
Thank you. Another question? Here, sir.
Thank you. Interesting thing about this is that there's some exceptional artists and architects and planners and organizers. When you walk around a museum like this, there's always a name on everything that is well done. How does the creator get his name out there if it's not promoted?
I think this is not the normal arts festival because there are these principles that are so tightly woven into it. And the gifting is a big concept, the decommodification. We did see one painting exhibit where there were names, but I think you can find out who the artists are, but it was not slathered all over because the intent is not to sell. Of course, they are coming there and they're getting fabulous exposure. But do you have more insight?
Yeah, I mean, it's very specific to the event that it is non-commercial. So it is not about promotion. It's about giving through art to the experience of the people that come. So it would not be the place to go to make a name for yourself or do something. Many of the artists that are there, this is their first time. They'll come up with a great idea, they'll put together a good plan, they'll apply for a grant and get funding for an amazing piece of structure or sculpture that they've never done, and then they bring together the group of people for that. In fact, Burning Man as an organization goes so far as to say that if an individual or a group uses imagery or anything from Burning Man for commercial purposes, that they'll come after them because they're so serious about it, not sort of turning into a commercial enterprise.
Couple more? Yes,
I
sir.
will say, though, you remember the woman, the huge woman sculpture? That artist has done similar, it's the same model who's sculpted in different positions over the past 3 years. This was the third year. And his sculptures have shown in other places. So it didn't come just for Burning Man. So he might get a lot of exposure at Burning Man. However, he's also working on promoting his career by showing it elsewhere.
Great show. Thank you for sharing that with us. My questions are, I think, mostly for Sara. You said this was your first time. I'd love to know how you got there, how you got back, how long you were there, and if you're going to go again.
So, you know, because it's Nantucket, it took extra time. So we went to Boston, and then we fly into Reno. Chip's done this for a number of years, so we had the routine of where to go to buy the food, vehicle to rent, et cetera, et cetera. Some people ship their bicycles or carry them, but he knew that there is a group that will actually rent them on the playa, so we just, first morning we went and picked up our bikes. So we were there for pretty much the full festival. We were there for 6 nights, I think, a whole week, and then we went back to Reno and flew out the next day. So it ends up it took us 10 days from point of departure to return to the island. You don't have to go for that long.
Many people go. I would say it's more typical as a first-time attendee to go for about 3 days.
I just jumped right in.
Yeah, and then sort of build up from there. But
One more in the back.
Yeah.
So Burning Man is really kind of cool, isolating creative experience. I was wondering how it affected your creative work back here on the island of Nantucket.
How it affected our creative work?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's still percolating. We'll find out as it continues to unfold. We pulled this together.
Yeah.
I came back so inspired. It's been years since I had my gallery. It was 2008. I closed it, and I forgot how much I like being around artists that are just really creative. And everywhere I went, it was, oh my God, that costume's amazing, or that car's amazing, or the sculpture. And so I came back really excited and rejuvenated. I don't know how it'll fold into the rest of my life, but did you have any?
My original reason for going to Burning Man is because of my interest in communities. And it is one of the more radical experiments in intentional community that exists. One, because of the way of the principles and so forth, but also even from an infrastructural standpoint, an urban planning viewpoint and so forth, how it's laid out and everything like that. So the things that I came back with that are inspiration, or how I brought it back into my own life and work. One was the community level of how, what are some of the ideas and experiments of Burning Man that are successful that can be brought back into other communities. In fact, I had a long conversation with Larry Harvey, who's the founder of Burning Man, where we debated which parts of Burning Man could work in other places and which couldn't, which were scalable to longer periods of time and so forth, or larger groups of people. So that was one. The other thing for me, from an architectural standpoint, you can't help but come away from Burning Man just being inspired about being creative in anything that you do. And since my life is centered around architecture, there is so much that I brought back from that. The technologies even that are used to build a lot of the structures are, no pun intended, cutting edge. Laser cutting and so forth, computer driven structures where all the pieces are made and then assembled like Lego blocks. That's been going on in Burning Man for probably the last 10 years, and now it's becoming more into the mainstream for other places. So there's a couple ways.
Thank you very much, Chip Webster and Sara Boyce. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you some of you next week for Eric Savetsky and the Humpback Whales. Thanks.